There was the last normal day, the last day that things were the way they were before they weren't anymore.
We kind of all rushed out of the house and said a quick goodbye. And, little did I know that would be the last time I hugged my mom.
He yells and tells me he's getting ready to go. He said, I'm okay. Just stay here. I'll be home in a few hours. We tell him bye and he leaves. That was the last time we ever saw him.
It's like the minute that helicopter hit the air, it just hit me what I was watching, because I knew he wasn't coming home and he knew he wasn't coming home.
For me, I took it more personally because I'm a nurse practitioner, and why can't I save him? I can help all these other people, and why can't I save him?
They're telling us that it was time, we needed to make a decision, we need to go ahead and just take him off the ventilator. And I was like, how do we know?
One thing I like to tell people is that if you lose somebody to COVID, your need to talk about the person you lost will outlast other people's desire to hear about it.
We make sure that our family members and loved ones' memories lived on. That's really important to me, is that people don't forget. I don't want to forget any of it.
So talk about them. Talk about them till people are sick of hearing about them. Because as long as you're still talking about them, they're never far away.
And the last thing that my mom said is, she said, when you get to heaven, we will look for each other.
Hello everyone, you're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. Today I'll be talking to Jessica in New Jersey. Jessica lost her dad, Xavier, to COVID on January 18th, 2021. When she reached out to me, Jessica told me that she had not really talked about her dad and told his story like this. She said she'd put it in a box, and now she was ready to share. For context, we recorded this episode on February 18th, 2023. Jessica tells her dad's story and also talks about how she is healing and the things that she misses most about him. She mentions Hannah's Faces of COVID Victims drawings and the Rami's Heart COVID-19 Memorial. Those are both linked in the show notes below. And with that, I'd like to welcome Jessica to the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and you live in New Jersey.
Yep.
And today we're talking about your dad who passed away in January 2021.
That's right.
And did he live in New Jersey as well?
Yep, he did.
Okay, so you lived close to your parents?
Yeah, I'm only 20 minutes away, 24 minutes away, so we're pretty close.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to start around March of 2020 and just talk about how you first heard about COVID, like conversations with your dad about it, how it changed your work life and your life and, visits with your parents and things like that.
Well, I remember hearing it on the news a little bit, and my dad was always watching the news, so he would kind of tell me too, but I would hear it like on, like podcast, just like podcasts or through work, or it was mostly like when I would listen to like my Google speaker in the morning, like it would say, oh, news for today, and it tells you like the latest stuff. And I remember hearing about it then, and I was thinking to myself, like, huh, I'm like, this is, it's strange, like it's something you kind of like hear out of like a movie when you watch it. So I didn't, like, I was nervous, but I was like, well, you know what? I was like, maybe it won't come too close to where we are. Like, maybe it'll just stay further away, because I remember I first heard it like when there was like, I guess, like a group of people that went on a cruise or a vacation. I remember some people were like getting sick, they were saying, so I was like, oh my God, like I felt like terrible, but I was just thinking like, all right, well maybe it just won't come close to home, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I was a little concerned, just not as much in the beginning.
Yeah. And when did you become concerned and when did it, like, when did you know it was going to be in New Jersey and be there?
I started getting concerned when I started hearing that there was someone in New Jersey that had it. And then as time progressed, like more people were getting it. And then I started getting like a little more nervous. And then once my dad told me that, because my dad was he worked for ShopRite, so he was an essential worker. He was always in the supermarket. So then he started hearing coworkers getting them and getting sick, and he was saying, oh, like someone was out. So that's when I was like, okay, now I know it's even more closer because it's like where he works. You know what I mean? So I was getting a little bit concerned at that point. Then he would always tell me like, oh, you got to wash your hands, you got to spray with Lysol everything, just make sure like you have a mask on and things like that, like just don't get too close to people. So I was like, okay. So that's when I started realizing like it was getting more serious once I heard like the first person had it in New Jersey, and then more people were getting it closer and closer.
Yeah. Yeah. So your dad worked in a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
So did you limit your time going to visit him, or did you just do that and then like did he become part of your, how they call them pods at the time, or your bubble of people, did they become a part of that?
uh, I I think we might have stayed apart for like brief, but not long, because I guess I just trusted that that I was gonna be fine. So like I didn't want to like separate myself from my parents. Like I still wanted to see them, so I would still go and see them and actively like try to see them on the weekends and stuff, because I worked during the week. So like my times to see them would be like on the weekend, and I still went. Like I still was like, all right, I don't want to like stay too far apart from them because I'm an only child. So like they always want to, see me. They were always like involved. So that's why I was like, all right, I'm not gonna let it like separate us. I still went over there to say hello and stuff and spend time, and I didn't let that stop me.
Yeah. Yeah. And did your work change, or did you have an essential job, or did you start working from home?
Yeah, I have an essential job where I have to go in, and I'm in the optical world, so I work with people with like eyes and eye care, and when they started telling us about it at work and what we had to do, and we had to start wearing the goggles and the face shields and the masks, they told us, they were like, we still have to work, like we'll limit what we can do, but we still have to go in. But I think for a brief time we weren't. Like I remember when it first happened and people started getting more sick, we shut down for a couple months. Like that was, I think, maybe the longest, and we had to collect unemployment for a little bit. But I think the max that we had closed down was maybe like 2 months. Yeah, like about 2.5 months. But we went back like shortly after. My dad always was working; he couldn't even take a break, so he was essential where he couldn't even take off.
Yeah. Yeah, eyes are essential. I remember our dentist here was closed. Well, in Oregon, and I don't know what the difference is between Oregon and New Jersey as far as closures,
Right.
but things were closed here for a long time. Like they closed in March, and our dentist didn't reopen until September of
Oh,
2020. So, and I just remember that because I had a tooth issue that I was holding off on doing anything about because no one was open.
yeah.
But things like that, like eyes, health, going to see the dentist. There's a lot of things that people put off. So
Right.
that
Right.
had to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, a part of me was like, oh, like, can't we just like stay like not working for a bit? Because I was still a little nervous. But then once they were like, nah, we have to resume, like we have to go back, and we'll just be cautious. We'll wash our hands all the time. We'll wear our masks. We'll limit the amount of patients that were coming in. Like we would everything had to be by appointment only. And if they had to pick up glasses, contacts, whatever, they would have to call us and let us know they were outside, one person at a time. We would go out, hand them their stuff, go right back in. You know what I mean? Like we tried to limit as many people as we could, like going into the store in the beginning. Like it was, so at first I was like feeling a little bit comfortable being back after that little short break we had, because I was like, all right, like we'll make it more like we'll be more cautious about everything so nobody gets sick, no one gets too close. Which I wanted to backtrack too. When I first found out, real quick, in the beginning of March of 2020, I was sick a little bit at that time too. I remember I got off of work and I wasn't feeling great. So oddly enough, when it was first starting out, I thought that at first I got sick, and at first I'm like, I wonder if I had it, and just never realized. I remember I was really sick that year, like February of 2020.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we know now that there were people that were sick from COVID in January and February. Even I've read some news articles that in December in the Los Angeles area, there was potential COVID cases there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my
Mm-hmm.
son was sick in January, my oldest, and he looks back on it now and he is almost positive that he had COVID when he was sick.
Right. That's what I wondered too. The only thing is I didn't have the smell loss and the taste loss. So I was like, oh well, I don't know. That's when I was like, oh well, maybe not, but maybe still, maybe I just didn't have it that way. It all depends.
Yeah. Yeah, and realistically, like your family, you and your dad, you worked, he worked, and you all made it for almost a year
Yeah, yeah,
with
looking back.
cautiousness and seeing each other. And so what happened in January 2021? Like, when did your dad start to get sick? Do you know where he got COVID from and what happened?
So I remember when it was just turning January of 21, the new year. It was New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, I guess. And I know um, they they went out. They just saw a neighbor. The neighbor wanted my mom and my dad to go over and hang out, and so they went. And the next, maybe like Monday after New Year's, my dad had called me, and he always called me every day. It never failed. He always called me, and he would say, hey Ma, how's it going today? So I remember he called me Monday and was like, hey Ma, how's it going? And I was like, oh hey Dad, what's going on? Like what's new? How was New Year's? And he was telling me how New Year's was, how they had fun at the neighbor's house. And then he said, he's like, I'm good. He's like, but I felt a little strange. I said, what do you mean you felt strange? He's like, oh, I just felt like a pain in my nose. He's like, so I don't know. He's like, I kind of had like this weird pain in my nose, and I just thought it was strange, and it just felt like a little weird. So I said, okay. And then he was like, I was just starting to feel a little off. He's like, so I went to the urgent care. I guess there was an urgent care by their house. And he's like, and I just wanted to take a quick test. And he's like, it came back positive because he did the rapid where you go in there and they give you the results in like maybe like a couple hours or so. So he got it quickly. And that's when he told me, he's like, oh, I have the COVID. So I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm not too happy. And I was like, where do you think? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I'm not sure. It could have been anywhere. It could have been from work, we think. Could have been, who knows? Could have been from the neighbor's house. Could have been, I remember he was working on my car. He had took it to the mechanics maybe a couple days prior to like New Year's Eve. So maybe he could have caught it there. It could have been three different instances, and we'll never know. All I know is he told me he got it, and that was when like things change. And but at first, like, I didn't think anything of it. I just figured, oh, he's sick. He'll be okay.
Yeah. So, how did it progress for him?
Well, the first week, I would text him and call him. I was calling him the first week, and then I would text him while I was at work, and I would just say, "Hey, how you doing? Like, what's the status? What's going on?" And he said, "Oh, he's like, I'm all right." He's like, "I just have a little fever." He's like, "But I'm okay." He's like, "I'm drinking tea with ginger because my aunt, his sister, had it. I think maybe a month prior, and she was telling him like what to do. Like, oh, if you get sick, like just do this, do that, like these natural remedies, because he was all about like natural things. So he's like, "Oh, I'm just drinking tea, this and that." And then he told me my mom got sick too. So he was like, "Oh, he's like, mom caught it too, from me." So I said, "Okay." So she was going through like the loss of smell and taste, but other than that, she was fine, like perfectly normal, just lost her smell and taste. But for him, he just said he had a fever, he had a cough a little bit. But he sounded fine the first week. Everything seemed fine. Every day I would check in. "Oh, I'm just drinking tea, this and this." Towards the end, like, of that week, he started coughing more, and when I would call him, he would just keep coughing and coughing and coughing, and like couldn't really like talk in between. He just kept coughing. So like my mom took the phone and was like, "Oh, we spoke to the doctor through telemed, and they told him like, he should just have some cough medicine. He'll be good." And then I asked him too. I was like, "How are you going? Like, how do you feel like when you're going up and down like around the house?" And then he started telling me, "Oh, like sometimes I feel like a little winded." So at first I was like, "Oh, I don't know if that's good, Dad." I was like, "You gotta, keep an eye on that." "Oh, no, no, I'm fine, don't worry about it. I think it's just, I'm just not feeling great." But the minute he told me that, I should have knew like something was to come when he told me he was feeling like a little winded going up and down the stairs.
Mhm.
Um, then that Sunday, before he got admitted, I FaceTimed him, and he just didn't like look right. Like he looked very like pale when I FaceTimed him, and his eyes were closed, but he was talking to me. So I was like, "Oh," I was like, "How you feeling today?" He's like, "Oh," he's like, this, the usual, the same." I said, "Well," I was like, "You don't look good, Dad. You don't really look like yourself. You look very pale. You don't look like your rosy, like peachy self." So he's like, "No, no, I'm fine." So then I said, "Are you breathing okay?" And like he kind of like demonstrated like that he was breathing. Like he's like, "Look," he's like, "You see me?" He's like, "I'm breathing fine." I'm like, "Okay." But he just didn't look right. Like I could just tell. But I didn't think anything of it. So I let it be. It didn't bother him that whole day. Then the next day was like Monday, the second week, and I had a text from my mom at like 5 in the morning, and that's when I knew something was wrong. Because she had texted me saying, "Oh, I had to call the ambulance. They took Dad." So I was like, "Oh my God." And I just bursted out crying because right then and there I knew. I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Now this has progressed into something far more worse than I ever even imagined." Because he was fine the whole week, and then it just changed overnight in an instant like that. Like he just got rushed to the hospital. So I just couldn't believe it. I was just crying because in my head I was like, "I knew it, I knew it, I knew he didn't look good in that video. I had a feeling." So like my gut feeling was true. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't, I only know from what my mom told me, the reason why she admitted she called the ambulance was because she was saying that that night, early night, like late night into early morning, he was feeling like she said that he was like mumbling. So I guess like maybe he was trying to like call her name, but like he just couldn't get it out. So my mom said that she got concerned because she kept hearing like like mumbling. So when she turned on the light, she was like, "Oh my God!" She's like, "Yeah, this ain't this." She's like, "I can't." She's like, "This can't be." She's like, "We gotta do something," because she just said he looked like he was like not good, like he was having like a stroke or something. She just said it didn't look good. That's what caused her to call.
Yeah. Yeah, he probably, I mean, I don't know, but wasn't getting enough oxygen and things were not right in his brain as far as like what he was trying to say. And
Right. That's what I think. He wasn't getting enough like, oxygen to the brain, or like his oxygen was probably really low and we didn't even realize it.
yeah. Yeah, and it's so interesting because dads try to be so tough, don't they?
Yeah, that's how he was. He was always like, because he didn't want to worry me and my mom. He never wanted to worry us, you know. So he's gotten like hurt before. He's been to the hospital before, where he had like hernia surgery, or like he shattered his wrist. Like that's why he always sometimes would be like, "Oh, everything's gonna be fine. Don't worry. Like it'll be good." And like he just didn't want to go to the hospital. I just know him, and I know that when he was starting to feel like more sick, not realizing it, he told my mom, he's like, "I don't want to go there." He's like, "'Cause they always say when you go into the hospital, you don't come out." So he kind of like always thought that. So I guess it was just like it was just an eerie like premonition, I guess, when he said that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, when was the last time you saw your parents in person before January of 2021?
Oh, Christmas time. It was Christmas of 2020. That was the last time I saw my mom and my dad, and you know, for some reason she says that he didn't even look right then, but I didn't notice that. He seemed fine, but that was the last time I saw him. We were all together, like me, him, my boyfriend, just the four of us. That was the last Christmas. And just leaving that day, I never thought, I would have never dreamed that I would never see him again. Though actually, my boyfriend is the last person that actually kind of really saw him, because I think a couple days later, I had to borrow my father's car, and he wasn't going to work because he was sick at the time, because his job already knew like he was on like COVID leave, because he told them he was sick. And he technically is the last person that saw him, because he had to go up to the front door to retrieve the car, and kind of just told him like, "Oh, I'm gonna get the keys for Jess. She's just gonna wait in the car." And he's like, "Okay." And he like gave my boyfriend the keys through the door, and he said, "I'm just gonna feed it through the door, but just I just don't want you to get sick." So technically, he's the last person that saw him, and I'll always regret that I didn't go up to that door like a couple days before New Year's Eve. I'll always regret that I never went up there with him to like say hello, not knowing.
Yeah. So, what happened once your dad was admitted into the hospital?
Well, my mom had gotten a call. I had kind of have to like say it through her story, because she was
Okay.
more in contact like with him in the beginning. But she had gotten a call from him, or no, I think no, 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 she had gotten a call from the hospital, and because she wanted to know what was going on. So they just said, "Oh, like your husband's he's not good." They told her that, he's like, oh, he was like really disoriented when he woke up. When we admitted him, they said that he had woke up, and he's like, "Oh, where am I?" And then they told him like, "Oh, you're in the hospital. Your oxygen was like, really low, and when you got admitted, like you weren't like speaking or anything. Like he was just kind of like knocked out." So they said, "You're here, and everything's gonna be okay. Like, your wife called the ambulance, and we're going to take care of you here." But he was just confused. So when he called my mom, he's like, "How did I get here? Like what happened?" And my mom kind of told him like, "Look, like you weren't doing good. I couldn't stand to see you that way. I had to get help. I called." And he was just like, "Oh, okay." Like, so he accepted it right then and there that he was in the hospital. So that was how he like, I guess, realized what was going on.
Did you or your mom get to go in and see him at all, or did you FaceTime while he was there?
So she FaceTimed him a lot that second week when he was in the hospital. She FaceTimed him a lot. They had put him on the CPAP machine, I believe, where they have the mask on you, and it beeps, and they give you a little bit of oxygen each time. I think it's the CPAP machine. I think it's called. It's like a huge machine that she was saying, and he had that on, so it was helping him breathe. So he was on that, and she had FaceTimed him a lot. She was talking to him. He didn't like being there, but he knew that he had to be there. And I would text him a couple of times and say, "Hey, Dad, how's it going? What's going on?" And he'd be like, "Oh, hey, Ma," like in text message. He'd be like, "Hey, Ma, like I'm doing good." He's like, you know, the nurses are taking care of me here. Um, I said, what did they say? And he's like, oh, he's like, they said I have pneumonia, but it's gonna be okay. He's like, they're gonna take care of me. Everything's gonna be fine. And I said, is your fever down? And he's like, yeah, yeah, my fever's, he's like, my fever's down. And he's like, I don't have it anymore. And then I asked him how his ranges were, like with the oxygen, on the machine. He was like, oh, ranges are looking good, looking good. So I was like, okay. But yeah, my mom would FaceTime him more so because she was able to handle that. I think I had FaceTimed him once and I couldn't handle it because I just didn't like seeing him attached to that like breathing machine. And it was hard to kind of like hear him because even though he would talk, it sounded kind of like muffly and like you kept hearing like that beeping in the background.
Hmm.
So it made it a little difficult. So I kind of after that last FaceTime when I saw him on that mask, I told myself I can't bring myself to look at him and FaceTime him like that. I'd rather just either call him on the phone or text him. I was like, because I can't handle looking at that, because I always saw my dad as a healthy person. So when I saw him looking like that, I don't know, it's just I just couldn't handle it.
Yeah. And so, how long was he in the hospital?
He was only in there that last week. He got admitted on Sunday. Then they were taking care of him throughout that whole week. I know Monday they were testing his oxygen. At one point, they were saying that he couldn't. They were trying to wean him off of it because they were trying to like see if he could breathe on his own without the oxygen mask. But I remember this was a Tuesday night. I remember I had called the hospital and I asked them how he was doing, and they were saying that he had a bad night the one night. So I was like, why did he have a bad night? And they just said, oh, well, like we tried to wean him off the machine, but he kept coughing and coughing and coughing, and like they just couldn't get him to stop, so they had to put him back on that machine. So I was starting to get concerned because it was starting to get to the point where that machine can only go so high. So they were giving him the most oxygen and he still wasn't getting enough. Like it still wasn't good enough for his lungs because once he got the virus, it attacked his lungs like immediately. So everything, all the mucus in there, the pneumonia, it was starting to like crystallize, they were saying. So it was getting very hard for them to like kind of like suck everything out and treat him. And at one point, uh my dad's like very smart, like he knows like what's happening, so like he was still like when they were trying to explain to him what's happening, you know he would talk to my mom and he would get frustrated because he's like, oh, I had a bad night, couldn't breathe. And then he was saying like, I'm getting upset because like no one's like really telling me like what's happening. Like they're telling me that I'm like, I'm sick, but he was like saying like, oh, I think they're gonna move me to another room because they just, I think they were gonna move him into another room because they were starting to say that he might need like the to be like intubed.
The
Um,
ventilator?
yes, the ventilator. And so once my mom heard that, like she was like, she just broke down and cried, and I was crying too because I remember I had called, I think it was like around Wednesday, Thursday, I had called the hospital again, and it was different nurses. They had switched shifts. They were male nurses. And I guess female nurses are a little different from males because the females, they're very like sweet and they say everything's gonna be okay. And, they know how to like keep you feeling like hopeful. And when I was talking to the male nurse, like he was very blunt, like didn't, wasn't holding back. He just said, look, he was like, the COVID is very iffy because they were giving him the medicine that I forget what it's called. It was something with a R. They gave Donald Trump it. It was
The Yeah, remdesivir.
yes, they were giving him remdesivir. And I remember my dad telling my mom like, "Oh, they're giving me like really expensive medicine." And she was like, "Yeah." She's like, "I know." She's like, "But it's gonna help you. Like this is, you need it. I know it's expensive, but listen, like it's gonna help you." And he was like, "Okay." So he remained hopeful, and I remained hopeful. But when I spoke to that nurse that night, like he scared me because he was like, He's like, he's on the remdesivir. He's like, but it's not helping. Like nothing's, the medicine's not working. Nothing's happening. And then that's when he was like, oh, he's like, they might have to, put him on the ventilator. So right when he said that, I was like, I got upset because I was like, oh my God, like it's turned for the worse, and I didn't even realize it. Like he said it at night. It can get different. Like it changes. Everybody changes. At night the symptoms get different, and it's very up and down. One minute you could be good, the next minute it takes a turn. And they said to me that they might have to put him on that. So when I hung up the phone, I was talking to my boyfriend. I was like, I feel so bad for my dad because I can only imagine how he must feel in that hospital. Scared, and he can't see like me and my mom like physically there. Like he can text us, call us, FaceTime, but I feel like that wasn't enough for him. And he loved watching TV, and they would try to put the TV on for him in the room, and like he didn't even want to watch TV. Like that's how I knew like he was not the same anymore. He was depressed. So I think he was realizing like, oh boy. So I remember they had asked him too, while he was still coherent, they asked him, you might have to go on the ventilator, do you want to go on it? But in his like will, he put like, if something happens to me, like don't put me on that. I don't want to be hooked up to anything. I don't want to be on a ventilator, like don't do that. So they asked him, I think a couple times. The third time they asked him, do you want to be on this? And he said, no, I don't want it. And he was very like, my dad was very strong behind his beliefs, and once he said no, no means no. So he didn't want to go on it. And then, you know, uh, I think Friday of that week, it was either Friday or Saturday. I think it was one day I didn't talk to him because I was just so upset. I couldn't wrap my head around it because I was in shock. So I think it was Saturday. I had got a phone call from him. Actually, let me retract. On Friday, I had talked to him, and uh, he was like, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" Like through the mask. So I just said, "Look," I was like, I don't want you to strain yourself," because he was starting to tell me like I can't talk too long because he's like, my voice. So I said, "All right, well," I was like, "I just want to tell you that I'm okay." I was like, "Everybody's fine, the family's okay." I told him like, "We all love you. We're praying for you." I told him that I wanted him to know that I'm okay, and that I'm in good hands, and that he didn't have to worry. Um, and he was like, okay, like he didn't talk, he just listened. And then on Saturday, it was weird, he had called me at work. So and I picked up the phone. He was like, hi Jess, and I was like, oh hi. And I told him, I was like, I can't talk too long right now because I was at work. I was like, I promise I'll call you later. So he said, okay. And I think I did call him that Saturday night, and just to tell him again, that I loved him, and that he was strong, and that he could pull through this, and that everything's going to be okay. And that's what I kept telling him. Um, and I, it wasn't until Sunday that they let us see him in person, actually. So we didn't see him that whole second week up until about like Sunday going into like after the second week.
Yeah. So, did they let you in because they told you it was time? Or was it just something where they let you come in and see him finally? Or did you know at that point that it was time to go in?
They called they called my mom, actually. They were like, "Oh, they were saying like his oxygen is getting low." They were like, it keeps getting lower. So they said to my mom, like, you might want to come to the hospital with your daughter. We'll let you see him, but only for a little bit. And so, she said, okay. So then she called me, and she said, they said we can go see him, uh, because, they don't know if he's going to pull through, because his oxygen just keeps getting lower and lower, and, nothing seems to be working. And they basically just want us to go in there to say goodbye, pretty much. So that's when we went there, and that's when I when the nurse was telling us about like what was happening, like why things weren't getting better, then that's when she told me about how the COVID pneumonia was what was messing up his lungs, and everything was getting hardened and crystallized, and they couldn't get anything out of his lungs, and it just wasn't gonna get any better. It wasn't gonna take a turn for any better, and we were praying. So they just said, "Well, no, we'll let you go upstairs," and but they said we had to suit up, so we had to like wear like the like the shields, the mask, like I think it was goggles that we had on too, maybe. No, maybe not. I think it was just the face shield and the mask, and then we had to wear like another like protectant, like like a clear jacket over over our regular jackets that we had on. So um, when we had got up to that floor and we saw him, I didn't even know it was my dad at first because I'm used to seeing him a certain way. So we almost missed his room because we looked at him. We're like, that can't be him, can it? And then my mom was like, no, it's him, it's him. So I was like, oh my God. So we went in there and I just felt so bad. Like I'll never forget like the image in my head. Like it's still sometimes like I'll remember it'll pop in my head, and but they had to have him strapped down to like the bed because they said that the night before he was trying to like pull like his IVs out.
Mm.
And he didn't want to be like, hooked up to anything, so he was trying to like, you know, pull him out. So his arms were a little bruised up, but they had him like tied down because they didn't want him to like, jerk around or do anything. They had him on morphine because they didn't want him to be like in pain, so they had him, on morphine. And they had the mask on him, but it wasn't the CPAP, it was just like a regular like mask, like a regular breathing mask. And then I felt so bad because, I told him that I was there and that my mom was there in the room, and I was holding his hand, and he couldn't really like say anything, but he was trying to talk. So I remember he was saying he wanted water. So I felt bad because the nurse came in and I asked him, I was like, my dad wants some water. Like, can we give him water? And he was like, no, we can't give him any water. So they just gave him like the little, like, it's like a lollipop that they kind of like, put like on their lips. So we gave him that, but just seeing that whole thing and just seeing him like, like ask for stuff and I couldn't do anything, like that really hurt me because all my life my dad was the strong one and like the protector, and like in the time that, I feel like he needed it, like I feel like I couldn't do anything. Like I felt hopeless because I didn't like seeing him like that.
Yeah.
So, I just held his hand and I just told him like everything's gonna be okay, and like, I was just rubbing his head, like his hair, and then like I was just looking over at my mom and she was like hysterical. And my aunt, his sister, wanted to see him. She wanted us to FaceTime her when we got there, so we did, and she was talking to him on the FaceTime in the hospital when we were there, and it was just the whole way that it happened. It was just very heartbreaking. So she had to see him like that. She was saying some words, and I remember they were like, "All right, you guys have to go now. Time's up." We only had like maybe like like a half hour.
Oh.
So that was it. I just said my goodbyes, and I told him everything's gonna be okay. I held his hand for a while. My mom was like rubbing his head. Like we just tried to, just take it all in, but we just still couldn't believe that this was happening. Like it just happened so fast, and it just you don't even get to register it. You just are just kind of like, 1 minute everything was fine, and then the next minute you're saying goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's such a roller coaster of they're getting better, they're getting worse, they're getting better, they're getting worse, and it just seems to come out of the blue that all of a sudden they go into this place where they're dying.
Mm-hmm.
It's, yeah, yes. So how long, So you were able to be in there for about a half an hour. How long after that was it and until your dad passed away?
He was still hanging in there that whole day. He hung in there that whole day after we had left, and I remember driving back. I don't even think I went home right away. I went to go take my dog to like a park, but I remember driving home like just like sobbing because I just couldn't believe that like that this was happening, and it just knowing like that he was still like that after we had left that whole day, like I just felt like so like sad. But the weird part was like I remember when I was driving home that day, I guess it was a sunny day, and like there was a beam of light that was coming from like the sky, and it just looked like those rays of like heaven coming down from like the
Mm-hmm.
clouds. So like that day I was like when I saw that I was like all right, I was like something's happening. I was like I think it's like a sign that, it might be time, maybe not today, but maybe the next day. And then he died Monday, so that was Sunday. He died the next day, Monday at 7 in the morning. My mom had called me and she told me that he passed away, and I just asked her if he was alone or if somebody was with him, and she said that she hoped someone was with him, but I would hate to think that he died alone in that room. I don't want to think that. And I hope someone was there for him. That's the part that hurts. I don't know if someone was with him or not. So, yeah, that's the tough part.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many regrets and things that you look back on that, at least for me, I'm like, I could have done things differently. I should have done this. I should have done that.
Mhm.
You know, I've mentioned this before. My mom was in a memory care because she had Alzheimer's, and
Right.
we had a birthday party for her at her window um, on July 16th, 2020, her birthday.
Mhm.
It was hot. Oh my gosh, it was so hot. And that place was not meant for people to stand outside in the heat, you know?
Mhm.
And so I told myself for the next month or so, I was just going to do video stuff with her every day. So I had a lunch, quote unquote, lunch with her.
Mhm.
But I didn't go back to the window. And I just kicked myself for that, thinking I should have gone. I should have gone back and just suffered it out in the heat just to see her.
Yep. Yep.
That's like, I think, my biggest regret. I think we all have to some degree, like a regret like that.
Yeah, that'll always be mine. I'll always regret that. Like I said, I didn't go up to the door that day to say goodbye to him. Like my boyfriend saw him last. I didn't get to. Um, and I'll always regret, like, I won't know, like, if someone was with him or not. I mean, I would like to think somebody was, but, it just hurts. And that's always going to be the darkest day of my life. A part of me died with my dad that day. You're never the same again. Any parent, for your mom and for my dad, it's never the same. Once a parent dies, it's like a part of you is gone. That part of you is no more.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Very well said. Yeah. Did your family have a funeral or memorial service for your dad?
Yeah, we did. We had it was a small one. Yeah, I remember me and my mom, we were saying how we were so grateful that we were at least able to have a small service for him. So, the main, you know, a lot of his work family came out, like his work, like the ShopRite family, they all came out and they all had nice things to say about him. Oh, he was such a hard worker. He was so nice and always helping everybody out and putting his stuff aside to help others. And he was always that type of guy. Like, he was always the type of person to say hi to you in the morning and always greet you and always laughing and, having a nice time and just being friendly. So a lot of them came out and said their goodbyes, and they were all devastated, and because they knew he was a hard worker. He was working in the union, and he worked for ShopRite for like 42 years.
Wow.
Yeah, he was in the union, so he was dedicated to that. That was his career. So he was. he was he's missed a lot uh, in that aspect. And then I had my his twin brother, my uncle. They're fraternal twins, but he had come out too. Wasn't too Not a lot of people though, because it was on an odd like day too, where like it was like in the morning, people had work, so but like the people that were there, we were grateful for, and some neighbors that knew him, so we were happy to have at least something for him. And I made a collage for him, like a movie with all the family
Oh,
pictures and stuff. So it was nice to at least have that.
yeah, yeah. And it's been 2 years since he passed away, just over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So how was that first year? I ask a lot of people on the show this. Did you go through like at Christmas and think about this was the last time I saw my dad? And did you go through the day-to-day memories of, like reliving before he passed away? Or did you, plan for yourself some sort of grieving process so that maybe you didn't go through that?
I think I had the first year is always the roughest, so I just had a lot of like playing back past things in my head. I couldn't get past like what had happened, so I just kept remembering like all the things like we did before he died, and the last time I saw him, and what we talked about. And um, he he I remember I couldn't listen to his someone he had a specific ringtone in my phone. So I remember, I don't know what happened, but I think the one day I was at my apartment. We were at the apartment, and I don't know, my boyfriend had a ringtone play, and that was the exact ringtone that my dad had when he called me. So when I heard it, I like just broke down and cried, because just things like that, like little things like a ringtone, or just something that reminded me of him, or like a song or something, like I just couldn't handle it. So I think for the first year, like I couldn't. Even now I still sometimes can't, you know I mean, you never get over it, but I sometimes feel like I still struggle. And I probably should have done some type of therapy for it, and I didn't. But I just kind of like went through it on my own, like, and my mom was going through it too, so we kind of had each other to like fall back on and be like, "Oh, did you feel like this today?" Or, "Did you feel like that today?" Or, and we would just like bounce off each other about like how we were feeling, because I know she knew how it was, how it felt too. That was her husband of, since she was like 18.
Mm.
So, um, but I didn't go through it really good. I had a hard time the first year, worse than now. It just wasn't easy. Just little things like that I couldn't handle. And I could see pictures of him, but then like sometimes I would think of like that last moment of that day when I saw him, and I just would try to shake it away. But it wasn't easy for me and my mom. It wasn't easy the last year.
Do you and your mom talk about your dad a lot and talk about what happened?
No, that's why.
Oh,
Oh yeah, we talked about it, maybe bits and pieces, but we'll never like talk about it in depth. She can't handle it. She doesn't like to, because the minute we start talking about it, she'll say, "Oh, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about something else." And I'm like, "Okay." But I feel like I always wanted to talk about it, and that's why I felt like, like talking to you, and like it's it's it makes me feel better, because this is like I said, this is the first time I've actually like really talked about it in steps, and I'm so used to just not talking about it. Like maybe I'll talk about it briefly with a friend or like my boyfriend, or I'll briefly say something about it, but I'll never like talk about it in depth.
hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like it's because people don't necessarily want to talk about COVID and COVID death?
Maybe. I don't know. It's yeah, you either I don't know. I don't know if it's that, or, it's hard. I guess it's hard for people when they haven't gone through it, when they can't relate and it didn't happen to them. I feel like it might be. hard to have them like relate to you and be like, oh, I know like how you feel. So I think that I keep it in. But then I have friends that have lost their fathers, and then we can relate that way. It may not have been the same way, but I can talk to them about it in that aspect. But I still never really spoke about it like in depth. I would just maybe briefly mention something, but never like in detail, you know. But me and my mom, we she chooses not to talk about it too much. She likes to deal with her grief internally, like on her own, because she's tried to go to therapy and she tried to do like a widow's counseling, and she just couldn't handle it. She said if anything, it made her feel worse, and
Mm,
she says that she feels it's easier for her to just cope with it on her own.
yeah. Mm.
It opens up the wound, she says.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like hearing other people, I guess, like go through it.
Yeah, different people, grief is wacky, is what I've noticed, and different people deal in very, very different ways with how their grief affects them. So,
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I just feel like me like talking about even if it's a little bit, like I still feel like a little better. I feel like just even, when I speak about it in depth like now, like this was like what I needed to do, but I always try to like, like think of my dad, and I try to not think of him like towards the end. I always try to think of him like how he was when he was, you know, better and lively, because I just feel bad. That's the part that eats me up inside is like he was young, so he still had his whole tail end of his life that he should have enjoyed. Like he should have been able to retire and enjoy, you know, being retired and not working, and just travel with my mom and just do the things that he wanted to do. And that's what always kills me inside. And like he doesn't get to see me get married or have a kids or anything. That's the part that I was struggling with too, with the grief process that whole year. Like, oh, now he can't do this with me, he won't be here for this, he won't be here for that, he can't see that. That's what I would think in my head.
yeah, he was 67.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a lot of life
Yeah.
left to go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it just every time I think about it, I'm like just thinking that he went through a lot in life. He would be in the hospital. Like I said, he would have surgeries. He'd shattered his wrist. He was a strong man. Like he always dealt with stuff, and he always had like little curveballs thrown at him, and he still made it out like on top. And then when I think about COVID and how a virus got him like this, it always blows my mind. Who would have thought that this was gonna get him? He always survived a lot of stuff in life, but he couldn't pull through this, and I really would have loved him to pull through, because I would have wanted to know like how what he was thinking, how he was feeling, like just to kind of like know like what was going through his mind. Like I just wish he would have pulled through, and I wish it would have been different.
Yeah. What do you miss the most about your dad?
His laugh and his accent. He was from Ecuador, so he had a heavy accent because he learned I'm sorry, he learned English when he was 18. So he
Oh,
always knew
wow.
Spanish. Yeah, and then when he learned English, like he would say certain words. I mean, he was pretty good at English, like when I was born, and like, my memories of him when it started. Like he was really good at speaking English, but you could just never get rid of his accent.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
Oh.
always there. Yeah, like he always had little nicknames for me, like cute little nicknames. Like he would call me Jessie Quita, or like
Oh.
he would call like the family like little things like that, or you know, he would like have a nickname for my mom, and I just miss like his funny stories, like the funny stories he would tell like when he was growing up, or like prior to my mom, like he would say like when he would like go on dates or stuff. Like I don't know, it would just be like he would just do something sometimes just to make my mom like mad, but he was just joking. But he liked to like push her and be like, "Oh, stop it," like. yeah, I chose you in the end, like don't worry about that. Like I don't know, just the way he was so funny and like, even when he wouldn't mean to be sometimes he was just hysterical.
Yeah. He called you Ma. Do you know why he? Because you said a couple times early on how he said hi Ma. Do you know why he called you Ma?
I don't know, he always just called me that. Like he'd be like sometimes he would just be like, "Oh, hi Jesse Keith," or he'll just be like, "Hey Ma, how's it going?" Like I don't know, it was just like his go-to like thing. He would call my mom that too. He'd just be like, "Hey Ma, what's going on?" Or he'd call her like Beef a Beth because it was something that her brother would call her because she didn't he my uncle didn't know how to say my mom's name Elizabeth when he was younger, so he would just call her Bivabeth, and then my dad took that, and like ever since he knew that about my mom, he would always call her Beefabeth. So like
Oh,
he just had like these funny like names, but yeah, he always just called me Ma just because, or he always would be like, "Hey Sugar," like he would call me Sugar too. "Hey Sugar, how's it going?" Or
wow.
that's just how he was. Yeah, I miss him calling me all the time too, because, like I said, I was an only child, and he was definitely like a helicopter dad. So he would always call me every day. "Hey, how's it going? Did you eat today? Did you eat?" And I'm like, "Yes, I ate." And he'd be like, "What'd you eat?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just ate food." And he's like, "I want to know what you ate." Like he he just always like wanted to know like what was going on, and he was always like involved, and he just liked to just to know how my day was going every day.
Yeah,
I miss that about him, not hearing that anymore really like it throws me off.
yeah. You were a daddy's girl.
Yep, yep. Every time I needed something, if he could, he would drop everything to just help me out, and then sometimes he couldn't. But most of the time, he was always there for me. He was like my biggest like supporter. He was always like cheering me on for stuff, or if I felt like I couldn't do something, he would tell me, "No, you could do it." Or he would teach me to stand up for myself and, speak my mind, and he'd be like, "Oh, don't listen to people. You believe what you believe, and, you stick by what you believe in." And he was just like a motivator, and he was always like compassionate and always like trying to make me feel better, and he always like spoiled me when I was younger, and my mom always likes to joke and be like, "Oh, well that's why you are how you are, cuz your dad always bailed you out and you always had him to help you." But he just loved me. That was just his way of saying I love you, like when you ask, when he always would ask me like if I ate or if I did this or that. It was just his way. Because he would never say like I love you too much like to me, like only like in text message or like ways like that, like in ways that no one would think like that means that they're saying they love you, like as simple as like asking like what you ate today or.
Yeah,
So that was like his way.
yeah,
But yeah, he was my rock.
yeah. I can tell when you talk about him. I can definitely feel that just from everything that you're saying about him.
Yeah, he was my best friend. He was like my best friend. He was like, I think as I got older, we became closer. When I was a little younger, I favored my mom more. And then when I got older, I was more like, next to my dad. But even as a kid, I still was close to my dad. He was still always involved and always, he taught me how to walk. So he was there for a lot of, or if I got hurt, the little scars that I have now to this day, like, he was watching me and I would fall or something. Like he was always there for that. Like it was just like he was yeah, he was definitely a big part of my life. That's why I feel this way and I feel like a part of me is no more.
Yeah. I have one last question that I ask everyone who's on the show. What do you say to people who tell you COVID isn't real?
Um, no, I never really thought about it too much. I think, I mean, sometimes I do get upset, I'm not gonna lie, because it bothers me, because I guess, if they just knew how it felt or how real it was, and I feel like they would think differently, because, I thought that at one point. I was one of those people. I thought, oh, it's nothing, it's not gonna be a big deal, everything's gonna be fine, and then when I went through what I went through, it indeed made me realize like this isn't a joke. Like it's a real thing, and so many people died from it, and I sympathize with everybody that has lost someone to it. And I always just tell people, you can't tell me that because you didn't go through it. You didn't see what I saw. You didn't feel what I felt. So I just tell them that, I respect their opinion, but I always just tell them that, they can't say anything like that to me because they just don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
They'll never know, and I don't wish it on anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I understand that. You don't want anybody to go through it so that they understand how you're feeling. But it is
Right.
frustrating that people don't.
No, that's why I always just, it's like what people say, it's best to talk about, you know, your loved one, and obviously I try not to like over like when I make tributes to my dad, I try not to like over push anything, but it's true that he's no longer here because of COVID. If it wasn't for COVID, it would be different. And you know I just I always say, like, everyone else that didn't get to deal with it or didn't go through it, they're lucky that they didn't have to. You know what I mean? It's it's just something that who would have thought, it's crazy. It really is. I still have no words for it,
Yeah.
but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to add too that I hope that they do more things for people that, have gone through COVID, and, you know, I it would be nice for them to maybe one day like do some type of like museum or something for it. Like I know I was reading a couple things about that. Like they were like saying how like, how they have the 9/11 museum, how they were saying it'd be nice to have like a COVID victims like museum just to kind of like see what everybody's, the people that got affected and like the families and the individuals that died from it. It'd be nice to have something like that.
Yeah, it would. I'm hopeful, but I wonder if it's going to happen even in my lifetime. I think I just have you submitted your dad's name to any COVID memorials?
Yeah, I did. I actually, that's one of the ways I honor him was I remember the first thing I did was there was a girl that her name was Hannah. She was doing drawings in the beginning, the first year that my dad died. She was drawing uh, pictures of like COVID victims, and she was saying, "Oh, if you want your loved one, you want me to draw them, send me like a request, and you know, I'll I'll gladly draw them for you and write a little description about the person." And she did that for me for my dad. So there's a drawing of him who has like the yellow heart in the background and like his silhouette,
Mm-hmm.
like a cartoon drawing. I did that, and then I came across Rima that does the COVID-19 memorial that it was in down by the beach in Wall Township.
Yep.
I came across her, and I saw her page, and I saw that they do the engravings of the stones. And I remember I had emailed her and I said, "Oh, I would like to have my dad featured on I want to have a rock for him." And I have his rock in the memorial, and I also have my uncle's rock in there too, because he died of COVID too, my mom's brother. And I have,
Oh,
yeah, and I have a stone for him too. So both my uncle and my dad are in the COVID memorial in a lair farm down in Wall Township in Jersey. So I do have him in there. And yeah, and then I have a tattoo of my dad too to remember him always too. That's
mm,
how I honor him too.
yeah. And what was his name?
Xavier.
Oh, wow. That's a
Hmm.
very regal name.
Yeah, you don't hear it often, right? It's a unique
No.
name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I tattooed his name on me so that way his signature, so that way I know he's always there, and a little inscription of a quote that he wrote me on a card he gave me one time. I took that and I had them tattoo it in exactly how he wrote.
Oh, yeah, his handwriting. That's beautiful.
Yeah, so I have that. So that's how I honor him, and that's what keeps me going. Is that's what pushes me in life is I just keep honoring him. I keep talking about how he was, his legacy and how he, how he was, and that just keeps me pushing. And I definitely feel like I've grown a lot stronger now in this second year than I was a year ago. I feel like, I'm slowly healing.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you for talking about your dad with me today and telling his story.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I really do. You have no idea.
Yeah. I hope that in talking about him and just because I know you said you haven't in a while, I hope that it brings some peace.
Yeah, I think it will. I think it will. Like I said, I do believe that he's in a better place, and I just know that I'm sure he'd be happy that I do. Things for him. I'm sure he'd be proud.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast, and if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. The link is in the show notes below. And if you're still listening, and thank you so much if you are, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, please rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this podcast finds new listeners. So please, share the show. Until next time.